Hi, this is Professor McLaughlin. I wanted to do this lecture is on Chapter 9 of the Legal Research Analysis and Writing book for Legal 205, Spring 2016. This chapter's super important for everybody, but paralegals in particular, because frequently it's the paralegal's duty to validate research. Lawyers do it as well, but paralegals double check. So when you are making an argument, when you are presenting an argument to the court, filing a complaint, even when you are advising clients, it's important that the legal research used to inform that advice, to bolster that advice, is the most recent. So as you know from some of the other classes you took, in Anglo-American law, we have common law, where we have court decisions that are required to follow other court decisions, so precedent, stare decisis. But sometimes courts overrule other courts. Sometimes underlying legislation is changed. Sometimes our understanding of how the law should be changes. So how law should be, that understanding changes. And then law changes. Or courts disagree. You have a federal case and the circuit, suddenly there's a split in the circuits and the circuit courts disagree. So validating your research is about making sure you have the most current research, but also making sure that the citation to that research is correct. And that's what this chapter is about, getting that right. Citators are resources used to check citations. And there's a lot of uses of the word cite. But what I also want you to understand, and we're going to talk about Appendix C in a little bit, you want to understand what the cite is and how we cite to cases versus citing to a book or a constitution. And really, what should be said is you're just validating all the legal authorities. And sometimes that will be a case citation. Sometimes that will be a different kind of citation. And Chapter 9 talks about all the different citators, which are tools that are used to check citations to validate research. So a very well-known citator is called Shepard's. And you took a look as you go through Chapter 9, Figure 9.1 shows you what the Shepard's citation looks like. And this is in printed form. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this because I'm going to guess that most of your work experience using citators is going to be online, using KeyCite in Westlaw and other online citators, or double checking citations through other databases. So we'll quickly go through Shepard's because you have access to Westlaw. And the second part of Chapter 9 talks a lot about KeyCite. So Shepard's traditionally was the only citator. It was published. It shows the parallel cite, which is if cases are reported in multiple reporters, like the U.S. Supreme Court. Cases are reported in the U.S. Reporter, in the Supreme Court Reporter, and in the Lawyer's Edition. all three of those citations are a valid way, for the most part, to cite to that case. But there are rules on what order it goes to. But that is a parallel citation. And that is, I wanted to see if I could give you a page number for your book that shows you an example of a parallel citation, but I'll bring one up. I'm not quickly finding one in Chapter 9. And anyway, when we pull up Westlaw, you'll see that your Westlaw database also does everything on this slide, which is it will show you other cases that have cited to your case. It will show you secondary sources that discuss your case or citation. Remembering always that a citation could be to a statute, could be to a piece of legislation as well. Speaking of statutes, also understand that statutes change. They're amended or appealed. Federal statutes change, case statutes change. Clarification is given. That may also affect how a particular statute is treated. In the IRS code, frequently the IRS will interpret a provision if it's unclear through a notice, and that notice is also it is secondary authority, but if it's the IRS describing its administrative reg, it's really part of the primary authority of the administrative regulation. Yeah, Shepherd citators are in print. Hopefully you'll never have to use it in print. Hopefully you'll always be doing it electronically. So for case citators, which the Shepherd citator, which is described in this slide, don't forget that for every reporter, and we've talked about reporters, and hopefully you've talked about how cases are reported. For every reporter, there will be a citator for that reporter, for the regional reporters and for the state case reporters, remembering that reporters are how the cases are published and also how the case sites are constructed. Am I going backwards or forwards? Okay, this is a little bit more on the Shepherds. I'm going to skip a little bit because Shepherds, it's good, but because you don't have access to Lexis, read through it if you do start at a law firm or you're working for an organization or a governmental agency that uses Lexis. There'll be tutorials and trainings for how to use Shepherds and the online citator. But for our purposes, let's get through KeyCite, and then I'll throw up another brief lecture demonstrating how you use KeyCite. But the Chapter 9, I think, does a good book with pictures, but demonstrating how you use KeyCite. Okay. All right. So the online citator, and if you're following along in the book, we've kind of blown through. I mean, you want to read all that information because embedded in the discussion of Shepherds is just an understanding of what citators do and what this whole chapter is about, which is you're validating your research. The lawyer is telling you to go double check that the research is valid, and like, what does that mean? So for Westlaw, you are using a tool called KeyCite. And in your book, I am on page 256 in Chapter 9. So KeyCite is available in print as well, but it's available through Westlaw. Westlaw and KeyCite do all the same things that Shepherds through Lexis does, which is to tell you if a case is the most recent law. Has that case been overruled? If it's been overruled, is it in your jurisdiction? Do we care? Is it a federal case, but it's not in your region? It was overruled. You're in the Ninth Circuit, but it was overruled in the Third Circuit. If it's a statute, is it the most recent expression of that legislation? Is that legislation still valid? And we'll take a look at that on Westlaw. Oh my gosh, is that the only... Wow. Okay, so we will be doing, I'll do a little separate lecture on key citing. So Bloomberg Law also has an online citator called bcite, and these will all do the same things. AutoCite, if you use LexisNexis, LexCite. Shepard's is the most well-known, and if somebody, the other thing I should mention, and your book does mention it, if somebody tells you to shepardize something, they mean to check the citation. So in legal lingo, that's a very old-fashioned way to tell, have someone check the citations, because it used to only be Shepard's. So if you're working for an older lawyer, they will tell you to shepardize, and what they really mean is that you're just going to use a citator that you have at your disposal to check the citations and make sure they're correct. And what are you checking for? So you want to make sure the cite is written correctly also. So you are checking that it's the most valid statement and expression of the law, but you're also checking that the citation itself there's no typos. I mean, there have been cases where people transposed numbers and cited to the wrong case, and the court found for the opposing side because the citations were wrong, and the court could not rely on that case. It wasn't like, oh, that's just a typo. So don't forget that a large part of, or please understand that a large part of cite checking is also verifying that citation format is correct. There are no typos. The citation follows Blue Book, and that's something I want to spend time on this week and the remaining weeks in the course. Blue Book is the legal manual for how to cite to things, how to cite to cases, and how to cite to statutes and newspapers and websites and interviews. And that is all in Appendix C, and this will be just an introduction to you. The Blue Book changes, the rules change, it's full of rules, and so happily there are some online resources that you can use to double check that as well. Understanding also that, so cite checking is also about making sure that the citations match the Blue Book manual for accuracy. And the bottom two bullet points talk about quotations, because the Blue Book also has a rule regarding how you format quotations. And so if in your document you have a quote, what should that look like? And that's also part of what you're doing in cite checking. So on page 261, and this slide currently in front of you talks about some specific rules that the Blue Book has. And these rules are very particular to the legal profession, and what they do is give a description on how citations use what's called a signal. And when you cite in a document or a court case or a journal article, and you want to compare or contrast legal authority, or you want to say that legal authority for example, supports this idea, or you want to tell your reader that in general you need to go look at this other thing, you do that through a signal. And the signal goes before the citation. So a signal in the rule book shows support for a particular idea, and it is placed in front of a citation to let the reader know that this citation is for this particular purpose. So the slide currently in front of you. If there's no signal, then that citation directly supports whatever it's connected to, whatever statement it's connected to, whatever argument it's connected to. If you just put the citation alone, no signal, that statement indicates that that statement is supported by whatever authority you use. And authority is your cases or your statute. Now, if you have a citation and before the citation an EG appears, then that means that the cited material is generally supports what you're saying, and it kind of says the same thing, but it is not direct support. It's you use example, like if you said a legal statement, you know, if the statement reads, most judges believe that the next appointee to the U.S. Supreme Court should be younger, and you want to cite to the authority that said that, you could say, for example, and cite to a couple surveys or a couple articles in the newspaper or a couple journal articles where judges were generally interviewed over a period of time and really said that the U.S. Supreme Court appointees should be younger, and that would be when you use EG. So sometimes you want to use the signal SEEC, and you use that when the authority that you're using doesn't directly say that your point is right, but it follows what your point is. And maybe flipping through your appendix might be helpful, because it does give a couple examples, but I'll also show you the Blue Book itself, and we'll link to it online and show what these signals do. C also is a signal used to show additional support. CF means it's similar to. It's you use this when it's analogous. The cited authority is material that follows along the same lines through analogy with what you're stating, and then you use compare to show that the authority that follows is a comparison of authorities that provides support for whatever the argument you're making is. It really is hard to understand it in abstract, so it'll be good when we get to a couple examples. And then contra signal shows cited authority is contrary to the proposition, and but C, cited authority supports a proposition contrary to the proposition. So it's against what you're trying to say. All right, so take a look at Chapter 9. Make sure you understand that. What I'd like to do is just leave this as a lecture on Chapter 9 that you can go through, and put up a separate lecture where we go through Blue Book and we go through Appendix C, showing you examples of when these citations, and kind of giving you a better introduction into what the Blue Book is and how it governs legal citation. Okay, thank you.